It's Paul's Security Weekly. Sans Paul. It's episode 870, which is 366 in hex, which is creepy. Both those numbers add up to 15. Did anybody notice that? Like, uh-oh. I mean, I told him I would only do Fibonacci numbers or Mersenne primes, but a couple of tough-looking lawyers showed up and they threatened me with like chartered accountancy, and so here I am. Yeah, seriously. I'm Doug White. I'm from Roger Williams University, and I am the regular host of the Security Weekly News, but my narcissism tells me that you already knew that. So, as it is, Paul's away on some secret venture or other, possibly in an opium den I told him about outside of Nha Trang, and Larry's, Larrying or something. Actually, I think he's doing a keynote address to very important people. Okay, I'll stop. They made me promise not to be weird. They did. They were like, don't be weird. And I was going to have Sarah Sherman as a guest. What?
How could you not be weird?
I don't know. I called Sarah Sherman. I asked her if she'd be on, and she said, no, you're too strange. And I was like, because, yeah, I went and saw her. I went and saw her live, and it was like, it was weird. Yeah. Well, we
pay you the big bucks to be strange.
Well, gee, that's good that somebody will. We've got the Govt Unravelling, AI Hijinx, bot chaos, recall, maybe total recall, Oracle Slopesquatting with pictures, Tycoon 2FA, college, who knows what else, a whole lot more on Paul's Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable that can happen in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today.
All right, Security Weekly listeners, save $100 on their RSAC Conference 2025 full conference pass. RSA Conference will take place April 28th to May 1st in San Francisco, also on demand. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC25. That's securityweekly.com/RSAC25 and use the secret code. I guess it's not that secret now. 5U5 SEC Weekly. We hope we'll see you there. Some of us are going to be there, so hopefully we'll see you too. All right? Yeah. Well, here we are. I'm going to introduce everybody, although they all know each other, and some of them don't know me maybe, but that's okay. We have an esteemed panel of hosts, and I wasn't even sure I could get in, but they did let me in. We have the legendary keeper of the secret word, Jeff Mann. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Doug, and for the record, the C in RSAC actually stands for conference. So
I know.
RSAC conference is a little you just read.
That's what it says. They tell me to read what it says. I read what it says, and I don't want them after me. You don't even know what that's like. They got tasers, all kinds of stuff. It's really bad when you don't read the words that they tell you to read.
That's true. Carry on.
We've got the only guy I know who may have stuck his hand in a particle accelerator, Lee Neely. Hi, Lee.
Hey, it's good to be here. And if you mess up with one of those words, I got people for that. So just hang in there, buddy. Or worse still, I'll bring my buddy Dr. Lou on, who says whatever the hell he wants because he's got tenure. Oh wait, so do you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so that doesn't mean you can't be fired these days, though. One phone call, and the next thing you know, they're dragging you off campus.
So that one call does it all thing is true, huh?
From what I understand, yeah, I keep hearing all kinds of paranoia coming out of the faculty. Like, people are like, they're getting everybody, man.
Oh, my.
Like, yeah, I was like, oh, no. We've got the amazing Josh Marpet. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Doug. Pleasure to see you on other than a Tuesday.
I know. I usually just see you on Tuesday, but this week I didn't even see you on Tuesday because you were on Friday, and then you're going to be on Friday again and all that kind of crazy stuff. So, yeah, cool.
Yep.
The esteemed guru, Sam Bone. It's
Good
Bound,
evening.
right?
Yeah, it's bound. Glad to be here. Good.
Yeah. Thanks. Glad you're here. And Bill Swearingen. Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Doug. Thanks for having me today. Started off really strong and nerdy, so I love it. But happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. All right. So let's just get busy with this. The first section I put together was about the federal unraveling and the government unraveling, and I don't want to talk about politics. I mean that's not what the show's about. And so and I know the politics people are like, politics is everything. Everything is politics, but that's not really why we're here. And we got a lot of different people with different opinions, and so we really need to worry about the reality of cybersecurity because politics happens. I mean, it's always there. I mean, I don't want a left-wing hack or a right-wing hack or a left-wing breach or whatever it might be. Buffer overflows are for everyone equally all the time. They do not discriminate. I mean, that's right. So the first one I was going to bring up was this story about MITER, and this story evolved a lot. During
goodness,
today.
Today, in the last 12 hours, it's been nuts. Yeah.
Well, every time I looked, there was a new story, so I just quit updating it. I was just like, okay, we'll just go with it, like whatever happened. But the story about this, Sam, you had two stories about this, so maybe you'd like to start off with that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's finally all over. But I think the end is good, what I was hoping to see. So CISA's funding ran out today, and until about early this morning, they were going to let it run out, and that would mean no more maintaining the CVE list. And this is something we talked about a lot on the show. It probably isn't wise to have everything depend so much on the CVE list, which is funded in this sort of unstable way. So they did get an 11th month extension, and they are working on making a nonprofit foundation to fund it outside the government, which I'm really glad to see. Because this current situation, something so important shouldn't be supported in such an unstable way.
Well, and so I think one thing that maybe what we should do is we should kind of define, because I'm sure that people, if they've been following the story, have seen MITER and they've seen, so I pronounce it CISA, so CISA, the government agency. So Sam, can you kind of explain what that relationship is between those two and how funding impacts this?
Well, I don't really know that much. All I know is MITER. I never quite knew what MITER was. MITER is funded by CISA, but they're technically not explicitly part of the government.
That's right.
But they're one of these government.
MITER is a pseudo-governmental body, so it's like the Federal Reserve. They are essentially, they're essentially created by Congress and various entities of that. And they're not a government agency per se, but they do get their funding from the United States government. And if they don't get that funding, then they pretty much cease to exist. Kind of like, when I worked for the Federal Reserve was like that.
And they're too important for that. I mean, it's not only the CVE list, they also have the common weaknesses exploited list, and they have they have that 14 stages of hacking, the grid that they make. Mm-hmm. It's just there are so many things they maintain that are really important that really shouldn't just vanish the next time somebody wants to cut government spending.
Yeah, I saw another story that I didn't actually cite, but they were talking about how maybe this is a good thing. We're too dependent on these things and so forth. And I have another story later that we can talk about a little bit too. That's a little in a different direction about it, but. I mean, just like NIST. So the other example that I was talking, somebody called me and asked me about this today, and they said, what does this mean? And this was before they said, well, they're going to continue the funding. NIST also provides many, many, many documents, standards, compliance documents, et cetera, to various people, like NIST 853 and so forth. And
you said
and
naughty word.
But I mean, when that stuff goes away, it probably doesn't affect large Fortune 50 companies, but it affects a lot of mid-sized and small companies who rely on that kind of stuff because it's free.
Well,
I think it affects everybody because
it affects
you have
everybody. Yeah.
You need to have a standard so you can interoperate with businesses, and they set the standards.
And actually, as the corporation, the bigger it goes, the more likely they have built their program around those standards, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, every compliance thing that I've ever recommended came out of one of those kind of standards, and whether it's the attack matrix kind of stuff or whatever.
Well, there's the IEEE. They aren't a government agency either, but they have those standards like 802.5. Yeah. What are they? The IEEE is just an independent organization not funded by the government, right?
Right.
They're
it's just a private organization.
They're not
the International Engineering, or it's the International Electrical Engineering Group, and they started doing all kinds of standards. So it's kind of like ACM. ACM also writes like computer science standards and things, but they're a private, like like a dues funded organization. IEEE is as well. So you can join, you can pay dues and all that stuff. I don't know if they get, I'm sure they get grant money.
Well, so going back to the CV. Yeah. So going back to the CVE, as of like last night. So I don't know how your guys' like hacker chats or like group chats were going, but mine were going nuts. And it was pretty wild to see the difference, just of where hackers and InfoSec professionals, where everybody fell in on this. Some were absolutely panicked, right? Like, this is the bedrock on which we stand on, right? We cannot lose this. And then I had other people that were saying, no, it's time for us to, we have to fix this CVE. And then my favorite, man, my goodness, the memes that came out of this were fantastic, right? Like, so I saw a meme that was like Fortinet, like guy saying, we did it, we did it. And that just absolutely killed me. But, so I'm curious, like where do you guys fall in on this? Is it the bedrock that we need, or is it something that we need, is now the right time to change?
Well, when I first saw the announcement, if I may, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jeff.
I mean, based on a lot of the conversations we've had on the show over the last, year, if not longer, I had that initial holy crap, but then I thought, given, how much grief we've been giving the whole CVE process and lack thereof, my first thought really was essentially, this is really bad news for the industry and all the organizations within the industry that make a living off of the CVE, not necessarily organizations that are relying on it to fix things. I put up in my stories, and I had found these before I saw the MITER announcement. I think one of my first couple stories is just a report, and it's free, and it's a report that's based on actual incident response and tallying up the things. And within that report, it talks about how few breaches and incidents are actually caused by vulnerabilities that are tied to a CVE. I mean, you can extrapolate that. And then there was a second report. Unfortunately, you have to give up all your contact information. So I haven't downloaded it, but it talks about all the Microsoft vulnerabilities that have been published over the last year. But in the highlights on the webpage, it talks about, some number of vulnerabilities in Microsoft this platform, but only some small portion are critical, with similar numbers for like the various flavors of Microsoft, which seems to underscore the fact, and I know we've talked about it off and on, that there's very few vulnerabilities, relatively speaking, that actually make it to part of actual incidents and the ways that the bad guys are breaking into things. So I kind of feel like maybe it's a kick in the pants to the collective industry, but if we no longer could rely on the CVE, then we might have to do something like, security.
Stop that.
But I mean, but I will say a lot of
security.
A lot of automated tools rely on CVEs too, right or wrong. I mean, just from the perspective of if this just goes away all of a sudden and these things are no longer supported, we may have to take tools and restructure them. We may have guidance tools that have to be retooled to use some other resource. So it could definitely result in a lot of cost for various people and put a kind of a kink in everybody's security plan. Josh?
It's
I think
interesting.
Worse than that, what will happen is you won't have a standard name. So you'll have like 4 different agencies reporting the same vuln and not realizing they're talking about the same thing.
Right. We've seen that already. I mean. So yeah, Josh, go ahead.
So Adrian Sanabria and I were having a really long discussion on this, and it's fascinating. His point of view is that there's only a few dozen actual CVEs that are valid every year, that are worthwhile, that are really a problematic set. Out of how many thousands of them are reported, and most of them are BS, and how there's literally companies that their quotas are how many CVEs they get named and numbered and stuff every year. So there's a lot of commercial BS here. I get it. I agree with you.
I don't think it's a perfect system either. And it, I liked it when it started as a guideline. I do think companies get way too reliant on, these rating numbers and things like that, where they say, oh, we're only going to deal with things that are above a 7.5 or whatever arbitrary number they've picked. But I definitely think that these kind of services can be problematic when they go away if we all expect them to be there. For instance, CISA. Another article was that CISA braces for more cuts. Threat intel efforts are doomed. Now, I don't agree with the second part of that statement, but I do think that, we've just spent, I don't know, about the last 20 years. It was in 2005 when I first started working on some of this stuff from a, support perspective. And I was very pleased when they created CISA. Because I felt like there now is some respect for this in the federal government. I mean, we have how many agencies that deal with physical crime? We've got Homeland Security, TSA, the FBI, the Treasury Department, ATF, the DEA, and all these agencies that basically seem to have overlapping missions. Sorry, friends in federal law enforcement, but we didn't have one single entity dedicated to this directly. And when they created CISA, I said, wow, wouldn't this be nice if there was somebody actually kind of riding herd on all this and giving us information? Mm-hmm. But they cut 40% of their budget already, and that has translated into personnel cuts. So they've started laying people off. And then I put up a second article right after that says MSISEC loses funding and cooperative agreement with CIS. And regardless about CVEs, MSISEC is a very important thing for a lot of organizations, especially law enforcement, city, state, and local governments, and people like that who rely on this information and intel because they can't afford to build threat intel shops or pay, commercial entities for threat intel, and they're getting it from MSISEC. And maybe MSISEC's not perfect, but it seems very important to me. And so CISA getting cut, MSISEC losing funding. I don't know. What do you think?
So, well, Doug, real quick before anybody comments, the MS and MSISEC stands for
multi-state.
Yeah,
multi-state.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
MSISAC, CIS has extended their funding through the end of the fiscal year, so that there's time. They won't go away before there's an attempt to resolve them, because I think the timeline for the cut in funding was going to be way too fast to do anything.
Well, yeah, it was just like today, and then, they went back and extended it like they've been doing with lots of things. But that, so it may well be going away at the end of the year. So, and then I don't know what replaces that.
So I have comments. I have a lot of things here, but one thing that stands out, Doug, with where you took the conversation here is, anytime we're going to be cutting funding, there's going to be somebody that says, this is the most important thing that we have, and you can't cut funding, mm-hmm. right? So I certainly understand that point, but I kind of want to bring it back to Josh. So I was privy to a very little bit of that conversation between Josh and Adrian. And Josh, I'm curious how you were able to talk about Adrian's point of view. I'm curious about yours, right? Like, on all of this, quite honestly. And sorry, Doug, if I didn't mean to bring it back, but
not at all.
Yeah,
it's a gestalt.
Yeah.
So the idea here was that, and I agree with him, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of CVE submissions, and there's only a few, let's call it a few dozen, that are like, oh God, we got to work on that. We got to patch that. We got to work on it, whatever, right? So his point was those are the ones we should be concentrating on. My point was, CVE people do the job of filtering through the crap to separate the wheat from the chaff. And he's like, yeah, but we should only concentrate on the ones that matter. I'm like, yeah, but you got to figure that out first. You have the problem of identification.
Is that the KEV? Is that the KEV?
Well, but the problem is the KEV is specifically has anything with a patch. So to be on the KEV, you have to have a remediation. The CVE doesn't care if there's a remediation. I mean, obviously they'll list it, but the CVE is the original, and then it moves to the KEV once there's a patch. That's as I understand it. I could be wrong.
Yeah, and so my point. I don't know if you guys can hear me okay, but I think one of the things when people say like, okay, so we've got we've got too much, we've got too much, and and we're focusing too much on these numbers, the 7s and the 8s. Imagine if we didn't have a number, right? So how would you, as a vulnerability management person, if you didn't have a number, what would your plan be? You could either patch all or none, right? Right. I mean, because if everything's a priority, if they're all ones or 10s, I guess in this case, then they're all 10s.
Well, I think they put the numbers in because people definitely like having some kind of ranking system. Now, there's always arguments about what that ranking system means and who determines it. And if they're all the same, my theoretical side says, yeah, that's the way it should be. Patch all. But I know in practice, when I feel like
somebody said that last week on the show, the patch all, patch.
I quote The Incredibles.
Well, they did say that last week on the show. I watched the show and they did say that, and I don't disagree with that. But that doesn't actually work every time in practice. When somebody comes to me and I've got 3 staff and one of them's already being laid off, and I've got 674 switches on my campus and 15 routers, and somebody says patch all, and I'm like, okay, which ones do you want me to patch first? Because I've got this many person hours, and those people go home at 5 p.m., and it takes us 2 hours to do each one of these patch jobs, and who's going to be down first? And there's a lot of different, qualifiers in there.
But this is where I think this happening maybe, just maybe, gets people to start thinking differently, because I've read a lot on this today and yesterday, and somebody of course brought up the idea of prioritization, but the context of prioritization is always in the perceived or actual severity of the vulnerability discovered. Maybe, just maybe, the prioritization should be more along the lines of what you're talking about, Doug, which is the prioritization of the systems in my network or network segments, not the vulnerability itself, but the impact to my environment.
That's what I recommend to people. I'm like, you've got to patch this from the threat level, and the risk, rather than saying, oh, here's a 10, but it's for some obscure, CentOS system that's sitting over in Dr. Fung's lab, and we don't really care about it that much. It can't even see the outside world, but it's a 10. We've got to patch it. Oh my God. Whereas, this router problem may actually be the real issue that's sitting on our edge.
I just see it as a whole lot of automation, and don't make us think about this and make hard decisions. Let's have this independent body that tells us what's bad, and then we can bitch about it all.
Well, that's easy. I mean, it's the easiest thing to do, because it's tough for companies to sit down and say, how do we prioritize this? How do we assess these various devices? How do we decide that this web server is more important than that router? And when we have to do that at some point. Yeah, Lee, go ahead. Then you, Josh. Lee, then Josh.
Okay, I'm probably going to say something very similar to what Josh is going to say, and that is that irrespective of CVEs and all that stuff, like you're saying, you have to work out the priority, regardless of whether you have one person or a gazillion people. You've got to have a priority, because somebody's got to know what order to do things are and what's important. And yeah, it sucks to build that. If it were trivial, it wouldn't matter. And so, and it's not just from your perimeter. I mean, it's got to be everything. It's got to have its place, and you also have to, by the way, know who the stakeholders are, because no matter what priority is, if you take my thing down, I go kill you. It's not really the meeting you want to have. Although they probably say it nicer than that, but you feel like that's what the message is.
I mean, anyway, Josh, that's what Bill said a minute ago. Each time we cut something, somebody's going to be unhappy. And I mean, and if you go ask people in your enterprise, what's the most important thing here? It's always their stuff.
Well, yeah. But Josh, was I close?
Josh, go ahead.
You were close in one sense. You're talking about the prioritization, and I want to add onto your thing and say that if we don't have consistent prioritization, at least if we don't have a consistent number to hang a prioritization on and tailor for our individual organization, we're not going to be consistent across organizations, and we're going to see things differently than that one, and our cyber insurance is going to get totally fucked. And then I want to add on to the fact that if we take out the institutions that we have built up over decades of trying to do this right, and yeah, we've screwed it up a little here and there, but overall, these institutions are there for the betterment of everybody. And these institutions are there to do research, testing, analysis. Let me ask you a question. Has any institution, any organization that you've ever worked for, any of you, have the resources, other than a governmental institution, let me be clear, have the resources to test 30,000 reports or the reputation to collect the 30,000 reports a year from everybody across the internet to find all these vulnerabilities. Because I tell you what, we either hang together or we shall assuredly hang separately. Okay.
Well, I've certainly worked for organizations that had the resources to do it, but the question is, would they? And the answer is, of course they wouldn't, because they're like, why would we do that? It would just benefit our competition. If we did do it, it would be held internally, and that takes me to another story that I had here that's kind of interesting.
What do you got?
This is this story from Bill Brenner. That's called when the government steps back, who steps up to ensure cyber defenses? Now, this was a kind of upbeat story from Bill about how, and so I'll tell you the history. For me, back in 2005, this state trooper came to me and said, "Can you help me? We want to build something to help the state." And they wanted to, and they were basically building a thing that didn't exist at the time to put together police, emergency services, commercial businesses like private enterprise, universities, and everybody, and state and local government and all that kind of stuff, and create something where we could all help each other. And I thought, what a great idea. Now, it turned out it was really, really hard to do because we had no resources. When you went to companies, they basically said, well, this is great, but if we give you information, are you going to share it with these other people that compete with us? I don't think so. And we literally spent years trying to get these people together, buying them drinks, having a good time, trying to get them used to each other so they would even just talk to the police, because the state computer crimes lab was perceived as being jackbooted thugs who were going to come storming in and seize all your servers if you called them. And we did accomplish that. We got it where private companies would call the computer crimes unit and say, here's what's going on. Can you help? And we got some smaller companies involved. But this article was talking about building sort of a private infrastructure to replace the government, which is scary to me, because ultimately I agree with all of you that these things seem to be quite important as government components, because just like the labs where they study everything and anything, NIST where they study everything and anything, I think we need these things. But I don't know, what do you guys think about that? I mean, is that something that's coming, that we're going to have to find a way to do that? Because if it's not there, we'll have to do it, and if nobody's going to pay for it.
Yeah, I think we should all quit podcasting and start building a company that does this for states. Quite honestly, I mean, what's going to end up happening is the states are going to have to pay companies to do this work, and it's going your state taxes are going to pay for this. So yeah, that's where that money's going to come from.
So your state taxes are going to go up. Your federal taxes are certainly not going to go down. So
That's right.
handing everything back to the states works out great.
Mm-hmm. But
not for us.
The cost is the same, yeah. Or you have nothing,
Doubled.
and you end up living in a total dump, and it's just chaos. So yeah, if you want those services, you're going to have to pay for them, and it's not as efficient in some ways, because now you've got. I've worked a lot with like state statutes. Now you got 50 states; they've all got their own entities, and it's kind of like the FEMA, EMA stuff, where each state's got their own emergency management services. A lot of cities have their own emergency management services, and then FEMA tries to get them all to work together. But boy, is it chaos when they do, and they all have different standards and different rules and different regs. Yep. They do okay, but it took an awful long time for them to get there. I do see maybe something like that starting out of this, whether it is a state-based EMA type organization, where they are going to have to take charge of it for that state. And of course, there'll be states that have absolutely nothing, just like there are states that have absolutely nothing in emergency management, and states that have very little in terms of law enforcement or state police or anything else. And there'll be states that have all kinds of stuff because they chose to invest in it. And I don't know what the best thing to do is, but this paper was talking about us all banding together, which it sounds nice. I don't know how well it works, because like I say, we tried it. We did it in practice in the real world.
These United States of America.
I mean, we couldn't even get Boston and Mass to talk to each other. I mean, it's like when you bring the Boston EMA and the Mass EMA people together, they all sit on the opposite sides of the room and glare at each other because, sorry, guys, you guys do a great job on both cases, but, they don't necessarily cooperate any more than our state police does, used to not really cooperate with other states. When Connecticut calls, they're like, what? Who are you?
So I
exactly?
dare say that between the six of us, I think we're all in different states. And I have to think that there's a huge amount of disparity if it did get pushed out to the states, this and so many other things, if it's just left up to the states to provide. I mean, Doug, you're in Rhode Island, little teeny tiny state.
But we'll have the crookedest one.
Yeah.
I don't know who's in the biggest state.
That was
Louisiana.
New Jersey's job.
Probably
Louisiana.
Louisiana.
Josh in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean New York. Come on,
who's in New York?
Like
they know how
I'm
to
in
do this.
I'm in Kansas. We barely have computers. So
Kansas?
yeah.
I've been to Kansas.
You're still on a DSL line.
Christ.
So yeah, I mean, I mean, there's this sort of libertarian part of me that says that's not a bad idea to let the voters in those states choose and say, hey, we don't want any services. You know, just like my wife used to work for a company where the average age of employees there was probably like 22, and when they would have votes on benefits, they would come in and go, would you guys like a health care plan, or would you rather have, like, I don't know, a beer party every Friday? And every time would you have a beer party? Oh yeah,
Party.
I don't get sick, you know, and you know, and the older employees, you know, were like, we wouldn't mind a health care plan. I have to get surgery, and they're like, nah, you don't need surgery, you know, just let's go skiing. And I mean, and so you're definitely going to get voters like that just say, we don't want it, we don't need it, and so what? And then they're going to get hacked to pieces. But I guess my big concern in this, beyond that, is that the world isn't isolated. You know, the borders of West Virginia don't stop virtually at the border of West Virginia. And all these things are interrelated. They're all interconnected. And if one place is getting hacked to pieces, it may affect all the states around it. And you end up being the one, you know, dry county surrounded by the wet counties, like we used to see. My wife's family lived in a dry county, and you know, when you got to the county line, you know, the dirt road stopped, and it was a 4-lane paved highway and lined with liquor stores. And you know, I mean, I think there's definitely concerns about this and how heterogeneous that's going to be when the threat is not heterogeneous. The threat is a wall of nation states that are looking at everybody equally and weighs in. And so I am very concerned about this. I think this will take a long time to ramp up. I think that was my result from reading this article was like, I hope they don't cut the funding in the next 5 years, because
the collective we have 11 months to figure it out. Otherwise, we're going to have this conversation.
Yeah, I like Bill's idea. We should start a company and just, you know, we can handle it.
That's right.
So, because
there we go. Keep transferring that wealth from you know, from the citizens.
I like that idea. Citizens, send me your wealth. Yeah, I'm kind of like, I mean, but I don't know. I mean, if this all falls back into the world of silos that we used to have, where we didn't have MSISEC and we didn't have any way to disseminate. I mean, when they just put up the fusion centers, we bolted MSISEC stuff into the fusion center, and we did have like small businesses sending in information about phishing attacks and other things they had seen to the fusion center, who were disseminating it back to other people in the state, which I thought was awesome. But
I did that.
That may go away too.
I was
out of curiosity. Are you aware? Does the current MSISAC have representation from all 50 states?
I think there's an I think there's an MSISEC for every state.
There's 7,
whether they want it or not.
So it's not a centralized organization that sweeps in all the states. It's designed to be set up in each state.
Yeah, they disseminate stuff from DC outward, and then your state has their own MSISEC, and usually it's, I mean, I cannot attest that there's 50 states worth, but the states I've dealt with on that, it was disseminated through fusion centers, which were set up after 9/11 in all the states, and they disseminate information down that way. And of course, anybody can subscribe to those mailing lists where that stuff comes from, and you get alerts and notifications, because I get them and they go to the state police, and the state police sends them out to all the local police departments and things like that. So it doesn't seem like, other than the intel collection, it doesn't seem like a super expensive problem.
So I'm going to ask a political question, and we'll keep it in the context of this conversation. In anybody's opinion, what is the purview of the federal government? So in the context of cybersecurity, what should be handled by the federal government versus pushed out to each state worries about its own entity, its own jurisdiction?
I'll take it. I'll take it. Screw it.
Well,
I don't have a right
think-
or wrong answer. I'm just
I'm
curious.
just going to keep it in cybersecurity and not go there.
Just keep it in cybersecurity.
No, I mean, in cybersecurity, it seems to me like when you centralize things like NIST, you save a lot of money because you have one central agency that's doing this and disseminating it to all these other groups rather than having 50 NISTs, some of which have decided to round pi to 3. I was talking about that with my students the other day, and I mean, this apparently it happened in the 19th century. The state of Indiana, it never passed, but somebody proposed a law based on some whack job mathematician that they could round pi to 3, and it got caught, of course, before it ever passed. But I mean, when you start doing that, you're now trying to take expertise and just spread it across 50 states. And of course, states are going to have a lot of different variation in how much money they allocate to this stuff and how much focus they have on it. And you're going to have states that are going, we don't want this crap. It's a bunch of nonsense. We don't even believe in it. And other states that are going to spend a lot of money on it. So it just seems to me like you get an economy of scale by having things like NSA or having things like NIST where they centralize these resources. I'm not a huge fan of giant government, but at the same time, I think research and information is a purview of the federal government. That's why we have things like the labs. I mean, I love the labs. I think they're one of the coolest things we ever put together because they give us all kinds of crazy research stuff, which is good. But, that's just me.
So, mildly surprised that the first thing you didn't think of was national defense.
Well, yeah, but that's by default has to be centralized. I mean, are you really going to tell each state they have to defend the continent?
Well, here's where the lines blur because many would argue that cybersecurity is part.
It is, and I was assuming national defense was a federal kind of thing. I mean, I know I was avoiding that, I guess, but I mean, I would assume I was assuming though. I mean, you can't defend your country at the state level funding wise. I mean, it's just not going to work. I mean, because one state will go, hey, we don't care. We're not worried about it. Kansas will go, who's going to invade us? We're in Kansas.
You got to get through every other state. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. We'll be waiting for them to get, I don't know, to Oklahoma. Then we'll start worrying.
Iowa.
Yeah.
It
depends on which way they're going, right?
Well, yeah. When those Canadians invade, they'll be coming from the north through South Dakota.
Mm-hmm. Josh, you're trying to say something.
What?
Well, no, it's we're back to the inconsistencies. We're back to the point where the if you leave it up to the states and don't coordinate at least with the federal government or some federal organization, it's going to be, what state are you from? I'm from Oklahoma. Oh yeah, you're a target.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the European railway model. So just talk about nerds. Used to in Europe, they literally had different rail gauges when you switch countries. So they would have to stop the train and people would have to get off and get on a different train, or they'd have to take the cars off the train and put them on different carriages so that they could get across the border because, it's like, these are our gauges. And I could easily see that kind of stuff with the states saying, we don't care about fishing. It's tough. Every person for themselves. Who cares? And other states going, we don't want our citizens getting ripped off. And you could just end up in this huge contentious mess. So I think with cybersecurity in the context of of national defense, I think that absolutely that's a federal level kind of thing that should be there. And I think you get economies of scale from doing it there because you can have things like NIST and NSA and groups like that can centralize that resource and disseminate it to everybody.
Yeah. And there's a reason people like CISA have presence in all 50 states.
Yeah.
And they work closely with the state cyber teams and state governments because there is a lot of autonomy at the state level, but you can bring the information centrally down, which is what really works.
The state has the resources they can add on.
Right. I was getting a briefing on Operation Cyber Idaho. They're reliant on their federal partners for good input, and it works.
And I think that's the best idea. The federal government does the foundational level, the table stakes, to make sure that we're all at the same level. And then if the state has money, resources, expertise, whatever, they can add on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And some will have a lot of resources and some will have very little. But that's good for everybody, because this isn't a kinetic war, and Kansas is just as much at risk as is Florida or North Dakota, who are sitting on the border, because it's not a kinetic war.
That's right.
And so the citizens may not perceive it that way, because people have a lot of difficulty with this stuff when you start talking to citizens about it, and they're like, what is this? Why do I care? They care when they get abused. But until they get abused, if you go, would you like lower taxes or cybersecurity? Guess what they're going to vote for? I mean, and that's another reason things have to be federal, because that unpleasant decision has to be made above the heads of people that are going to always vote for a beer party on Friday instead of health benefits.
Well, yeah, and another, I mean, and I don't think it's going to be put up that way, Doug. It's going to be put together. Do you want cybersecurity, or do you want, the Department of Education? Well,
yeah.
Both, but yeah.
But you have to pick. Yeah,
right.
It's one of those kind of things. All right. Anything else about this? I mean, this is a huge issue, and I think we could easily spend 2 hours talking about it, and we probably wouldn't solve it in 2 years.
How about you want to go on to recall or AI?
I'm going to go and talk about this AI recall stuff, because everybody that's watched my show knows I keep ranting about
A1 recall.
Yeah, A1 recall.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help myself with this. I originally had this as my number one story, even though it's kind of yesterday's news. But if you don't know, recall's back. And if you don't even know what recall is, and you don't remember this dreadful thing when it first came out.
If you don't recall,
thank you. That's why Bill's my main writer.
That's right.
But Microsoft's not going to let you forget, or not going to let you not recall this. I mean, in fact, this is with this product. I guess you could look up where you first looked this up. I mean, it's a very strange thing. So the idea of this product is that every few seconds, Windows 11 and Recall will take a full snapshot of what you're working on in your desktop. Notice every few seconds. And they're going to look at where you're working, where you're typing, what your username and password is. Oh, they fixed that. That white paper you have about the secret deactivation code for the robot security dogs, and where you're talking to ChatGPT about how to say, that's a large schnitzel in German.
Yep. So it's key logging and screen scraping as a feature.
It is. It's exactly keylogging and screen scraping as a feature. So all these images then get put into a local database, and Copilot, I presume, processes them into some kind of image soup. And then you get to search through them later in this database. Now, I don't know. I really struggled understanding why I would do this. What was I searching for last month?
We've all been there, right? We've all been there where oh my God, I just was reading that article last week and I need to tell this person about it. We've all been there, right?
I guess it could be a kind of recall facilitation where you say, I was reading something last week about the hula. What was that? And it could go, let me refer to your desktop.
Yeah. Or you deleted that document, or, whatever it is, right?
I knew that some of you would have ideas for this, because I've really been frustrated with it. But so, I have backups now, unlike the old days where wait, what just happened? My code's gone.
Right.
I hadn't saved. Oh my God.
Now, so when Recall came out, when the first, when we first heard about it, there was a huge backlash from pretty much all of the tech, so the security groups and the tech groups pushed back. Why? Because it's a huge security risk, right? If your computer were to become compromised in some way, that data then would be accessible by the attacker, the threat actor, the person who has control of your computer, and so then the question gets asked, well, what could possibly go wrong? Everything, right? So passwords,
the very way it started. So this was introduced last May. Yeah. And the very way it started makes me concerned, because I don't trust these guys to start with. But, when they first introduced it, the very first criticism of it was, so this is just going to start running on my machine? Yes. And then they pulled it back and they said, now it's got an opt-in feature.
Which is okay.
So you didn't
Doug, that's okay, man. If it's an opt-in, and that's where it is right now, it's opt-in. You have to go and turn it on.
I know, but the fact that they didn't have that in there to start with worries me. Is what I'm getting
for
at.
sure.
Lee.
Yeah, Lee.
So okay. Bill, you opted out.
Yeah.
I opted in. We're collaborating. So I'm getting screenshots of everything you sent me that you don't think should be screenshotted every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
What could possibly go
What
wrong?
could possibly go wrong? Right.
And so
Yeah.
that's the creepy part. I mean, I like opt-in features, by the way, not forced on. I think that's a good model. But somebody out there is giving me a yeah, but I know that. But just for the general.
But that's a good point. I mean, Lee,
I don't know any technology out there that hasn't said they're opt-in and at some point they don't flip it to opt-out.
Yeah.
Or they suddenly put out an update and it flips to opt-in.
Tell me I'm wrong.
No,
well, it's called the tyranny of the default, right? And so like what you can expect.
But every time there's a refresh or update,
for
now. Pop-up box every 15 minutes to say, wouldn't you really like to turn on recall? And you're like, oh my God, please stop asking me. And eventually you just hit okay because you weren't paying attention.
Right.
In fact, just as a sort of poke at this, Bill had your story number 2 was, Microsoft warns that anyone who deleted the mysterious folder that appeared after the latest Windows 11 update must take action to put it back.
Yes.
And I'm like, I mean, these are the people you're going to trust with every few seconds, they're going to grab your desktop. And even for the people that have opted out who happen to be sharing your desktop. And so I added to that, what about standards? So if I open a window, I can open, and all of you can too, I'm sure I can open a window right now and I can look at student records at my university. I can see where they live. I can see how old they are. I can see their social security numbers. I can see their grades.
Prove it.
FERPA.
Let me see it.
Yeah, we're not going to do that because you can be fired for that. Tenure does not protect you from FERPA violations, so we don't do that. But I mean, if I've got this thing running, and now Microsoft tells me, Big Brother Microsoft's got its hand on my shoulder saying, all is well, remain calm. This is local. It's a local database. It's a local AI. All the information's local. And trust us that we're, and I'm like, wait a minute, look at this thing with this mysterious folder. How long is it going to be before there's something like that in this? And they go, oh, did you delete the mysterious folder that was in that other folder? And if you did delete that, you just opted into everything and Microsoft just uploaded your entire database from recall because you deleted a mysterious folder that we're not even going to explain to you. You need to put that back or your stuff's being uploaded and we're selling it to China as fast as we can. I mean, I know they're not doing that, but that's just my paranoia.
Let's clarify, however, that this is not abnormal. For example, if you have here has an iPhone 15 or 16, because if you do, you now have Apple Intelligence on your phone. So you have an LLM.
What, you mean they're watching what I'm doing?
Yes, including the masturbation sessions.
Excuse me for a few minutes. Yeah. There's a couple of videos I need to delete.
Too late. They are already uploaded.
They're already in China.
Yeah.
So the thing is that if you have, and by the way, on Android phones, it's is it Samsung or one of the brands you already have an LLM watching you. So at
Apple too. I mean, that LLM's there whether you like it or not. That thing popped up and it's like running all the time and it's constantly begging for attention. It's worse than a cat.
Well, I mean, like, let's go back a little bit because like I from what I understand, the reason why Apple is having such a difficult time with Apple Intelligence is because what they're running into is because the way that they have architected the iPhone, that those data sets are not really available to Siri. Because let me ask you something. So I don't have a 15 or 16. I still have a 14. I don't have Apple Intelligence. How much better is Siri now? Like for those of you that are, it's not. Right?
It's the same. Not. It's the same.
It might actually be a little bit worse.
I turned it off. I didn't try it.
Right. It might be a little bit worse because it has to outsource something to ChatGPT here or and it's not seamless.
I tried it. I mean, it's slower, but basically the answers to the stuff I ask Siri is pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah. Sorry. I don't know the answer to that.
Actually, I did have it on for a little while, but I didn't notice any difference. So I turned it off because I wasn't comfortable. So,
from what I understand,
shits and giggles, and honestly, it's exactly the same. Except sometimes it goes, "Do you want me to ask ChatGPT?"
That's right.
Okay,
right. That's exactly right. And so, and that's my point, Josh. That's my point. From what I understand, and I might be wrong on this, but from what I understand, Apple made a lot of claims when they came out with AI Apple Intelligence that they have not been able to deliver on.
Your life better.
Right. But they have not been able to deliver on it. And that is because of the way that phone is architected, or the way that that data in that phone is architected. Right.
And credit to them for that, by the way.
And credit to them. Now,
because what it means is they're actually properly sandboxing their apps and their data.
And now they're trying furiously to not, right? Right. They're furiously trying to figure out, but that's not recall. That's not recall. Recall is literally a keylogger that's on all the time.
Oh, and my other problem with it is resources. I mean, the whole premise of AI really is.
Yeah, I get him with this with Paul too. Like Paul, we've got this computer that's 10 years old and it doesn't run Windows anymore, so I got to run Linux. Man, just fucking throw that shit away and get a new computer. They cost $800 now, and you know what I mean.
But they're like our kids. I have
tariffs
literally, I'm gonna go next door. I got a whole room full of them. They're old. They're sitting in there, weeping, wanting to be used, running Windows, 95.
Man, come on now. Just but my point is, so I've been there too. I also am of a certain age where I have old computers. When you stop and think about how inefficient older computers are, just how power efficient they are, it's easy to throw them away. Right.
That's why I get those notices all the time from the utility company that they literally.
Are you growing weed? Right. I'm just all my computers.
Literally, they actually sent us a notice saying, "Would you like us to come out and examine your home to determine why you used 127% more power than the average home in your neighborhood?" And I'm like, I bet if I check yes to this, the state police are going to show up because I know that's what they think.
Yeah, and you just send back a picture of your server rack, right? Because my neighbors don't have a server rack in their basement. That's
what I told them. I was like, I have servers. I've got old computers that are very inefficient. I mean, because I've literally got one sitting in there on the workbench. I mean, you turn that thing on, the lights dim. I'm not kidding you. I mean, it literally all the lights in the house just kind of go, whoa. Because that thing is a power sucker.
Let it go, man.
I have a buddy with
the video cards.
I used to replace my server every couple of years, and every year it got smaller and used less power. Now it's a dang Intel NUC running as many VMs as I need.
That's exactly right.
I have those too.
That's exactly
I do have those. We no longer have a 1,500 watt power supply in every single room of our house with a video card. We do have, the little thin clients and things like that. But I still got this big honking thing I'm doing this on that's sitting here with multiple video cards sucking down 1,200 watts each that sound like hair dryers when they start up. Keep you warm though. My cats love them. They sit right there behind it with the hot air blowing on them. Because it's kind of like a hair dryer. Now, the resources here was another thing that bugged me a bit because I looked it up. And so I put the story up if you're interested. So it said that you had to have at least 25 gigs of hard drive space, which doesn't sound like much, for a 1 terabyte or more drive, which was a little weird to me. I was like, wait. It also said the default was 150 gigs. And I'm like, so what if I got 5 10 terabyte drives? Do I only need 150 gigs for this thing? And you can set the maximum storage duration for how long the snapshots persist. And this is a tricky, sneaky thing to me. They said you can set it to 30, 60, 90, or 180 days, or the default where they persist until the maximum storage limit is reached. And then it's all FIFO stuff. But I was thinking about this. I was like, so if this stuff is getting churned into virtual butter and the snapshot's gone, but it's in the LLM, how big is this LLM thing going to get? And how do you actually use this over time? Because I would think the LLM would get pretty big pretty fast if it's taking a snapshot every 2 seconds. Even if the snapshot's deleted, aren't those being churned? That was the whole premise, that it was going to, scrape.
Maybe this is the first chapter of iRobot, and that's how the already sentient computer is trying to reproduce.
Ooh, so this is like the evil Microsoft AI that's gotten out of control, and it's like sending its minions to all of us and going, "You will use this. You will use this. You will use this."
That's a good question, Doug. And I don't really know how that works. Like, so if you're training your AI and you remove that source data, right? That AI still understands, still has that in its.
I mean, that would make sense because the LLM should actually churn that into something else. So the snapshot would no longer matter, but it also, the implication that, the snapshot is gone.
Yeah.
Doesn't give me much solace because I'm still thinking, but isn't the snapshot churned into my virtual butter and it's still sitting there in this other thing that could get compromised? No,
if it works like Microsoft if it works like Microsoft Copilot, it does retrieval augmented generation, which means it does not retrain the AI. It just adds this to as context.
That's so once the snapshot's gone, it's useless.
Yes, that would be if they're using RAG, which is almost certainly what they're doing. Yes, because that's why they brag about how many millions of parameters it'll take. You can put in like a whole novel worth of data in one question for this reason. That's the added data for context, which is not used to train the AI.
So it doesn't actually learn. It just has a sort of static situation where it's quickly searching through all these snapshots and going, sorry, you set this on 30 days and whatever you're asking me about was 6 months ago. It's gone. Have a nice day.
Well, I know that's true of Microsoft Copilot. I'm not sure exactly how recall works, but that's how I think it does.
It uses Copilot, and I would presume that's exactly what they're getting at here. So that's very helpful. In fact, you had a story about Copilot, about dumping, and this was the same kind of terror to me because it was about sharing your app screens. Was that your story? Yeah, it was your story. It was your 10th story. Sharing your app screens with Copilot. Yeah. Which I like the idea of. It's like, I don't know how to use this. Give me a guide or something, and it figures it out. Yeah. But I mean, it's still scary.
Well, but this is what the real future is. Everyone's rolling out these agents where it will do things for you, like make a plane reservation for me, and like this thing that will call your parents for you and stuff. They're trying to make like a secretary.
I put that on there. We're going to talk about that.
But
hey, Dad, I need some cash.
They're trying to make like a butler or secretary that will do work for you by reading your emails and going to websites and doing things. That's what everybody wants. And Salesforce claims they've already got it going in the form of something useful for marketing. And Microsoft is trying to get in there. Everyone's trying to do this now.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's trying to find the next mousetrap, and I don't disagree with it. I mean, I like the concept, and I see why people want it. I want Majel Barrett. I want to say, hey, computer, tell me how to make a perfect martini and get the ingredients and send them down here, and while you're at it, we need ice.
Nice Star Trek reference, by the way, Doug.
Yeah. That's a good one, Majel Barrett. In fact, just as a side nerd note, if you don't know, Majel Barrett was Roddenberry's wife.
Chapel.
And
Nurse Chapel.
And Majel Barrett had many roles and had appeared in person on all the series until she died. But before she died, she recorded a compendium of words because her voice is the voice of all the enterprise computers through all the different series. And she went ahead and did that for them when she was getting old so that they would always be able to reproduce her voice on Star Trek.
She was about black wig on the unaired pilot. She was the first officer?
She was number one.
Yeah, she was the first officer. Number one. She played number one was her name. Yeah, in the pilot episode. Yeah, before they even had Shatner and all that stuff. But I mean, would you dump your apps into? So I mean, back to the immediate matter at hand. Would you dump your apps into Copilot?
Heck yeah,
Sam.
If it worked,
Bill would.
Yeah.
Well, if it helped, I would do it. I mean, for example, I'd love to have it read my email and pick up the important stuff and throw away the spam. That would be a huge help.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I talk about paranoia, but I adopt these things like crazy because I want that convenience, and I'm 100% with you on that. If I could take these hundreds of emails I get, and Majel Barrett can go through them and say, I eliminated all the crap. These two students have questions, and I went ahead and answered them because I know the answers because the questions were stupid. Sorry, students. But, when students ask me to be, students write me questions.
Not you, Timmy. I wasn't talking about you.
No, it's not you, Timmy. I have it on my syllabus. I'm like, please, I'm not your concierge. If you write me a question and you say, hey, Doug, what day is my final? I'm like, I don't know. Go to the registrar site and look it up. They have a link. So just go there. And if my AI could do that for me, I'd be doing that all day long. And if it could answer those kind of questions, if it could grade my papers, if it could do all these things for me, I'm sure I would be grabbing onto it with both hands and hanging on. But it still makes me feel paranoid because I know that this stuff is going somewhere.
Well, and I gave a talk to the California Psychological Association, and all the small business owners are using AI tools to do all this stuff. If you do any kind of medical work, there are all these onerous forms, and everybody's using cloud-based AI services to do all that now.
Yeah.
Deploying enterprise AI, tools like Copilot from Microsoft 365 and Glean are prone to oversharing and data leakage. They lack the in-depth access controls required to ensure that query responses align with users' need to know boundaries. Without proper access controls, these tools accelerate the discovery of improperly secured sensitive files within the organization's M365 environment. Gnostic enables enterprises to safely adopt AI through setting need-to-know based access controls. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Gnostic and see how Gnostic can help stop AI oversharing.
But so I have another story for this too, though. I want to put this one in there as well. One of the things I've been noticing, and I use ChatGPT all the time. I really do. I love it. I let it validate stuff I'm doing. I use it for ideas. I ask it to translate things. I ask it for, to be my thesaurus, and I love it for that.
Of course. Oh yeah. I just want to say I've been using Gemini, just the one built into Google. And in the last week, I've had to write 2 new cryptography projects with tutorials explaining how to do post-quantum encryption hands-on. And when I asked that, Gemini just writes the whole thing with the explanation and code, and it works. And it didn't do that a month ago. A month ago, it was garbage. They've gotten a lot better, really recently.
They are. But I do have concerns, and I think, again, when someone like yourself, so this is more of a concern for people in general, when somebody like Sam or some of the rest of us, when I was using it for database, it was ChatGPT was making some pretty heinous mistakes.
Oh, yeah. I saw a test where they said its accuracy at doing something like a database lookup ranges from 20% to 0%. It's really bad at that kind of mathematical, factual reasoning. It's the humanities majors when I was in school. They can't do math at all. They can't do logic at all. They can do words.
Yeah. And I was finding it making mistakes. Now, I was not using it to answer questions for me. I was using it to facilitate something I wanted to talk about and asking it, what's your take on this? Because that way I had a second example. It helped me to put together a better example. But I noticed these mistakes, and I got very nervous about it to the point that I was warning students in my database class going, be careful if you use these things because you could make a really, really, bad error. But this story, it's about AI package hallucinations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I thought, I've seen this.
I've seen this too.
I have seen this.
Absolutely have seen this.
I see that all the time. I ask it, why doesn't this package work? And it says, do apt-get install, but when you install it, it's not there.
Yeah.
Yep. And I've seen it on other things where it says, use this package, and you go, why is this crashing? And it goes, you got me. That's not a real package. And I'm like, wait, you knew? You knew it wasn't. Why did you tell me to use it? You knew it wasn't real. And then I start yelling at the AI, and it's going, please don't get angry with me, Doug.
I would wager that it doesn't know it's not real. It just sort of deduced from your question that it probably wasn't real and is guessing. I've got one to teach students retrieval augmented generation. I asked Llama about Microsoft Recall, and Llama was only trained up through the middle of 2023, and Recall was announced in 2024. So it doesn't know anything. And if you use a model that was trained before that, it will write a whole page full of garbage, completely believable. Like it's a way to recall emails you sent. Then it'll say, try, and you ask the same question again. It'll say, it's a way to roll back patches. It'll make up something. It doesn't, AIs do not have the ability to say, I don't know. And maybe they've added that to the very latest ones.
I had it hallucinating. I had it hallucinating hallucinations the other day. I was asking it for, I wanted a Packer script to create this VM, and it was using a really outdated version of a bunch of stuff, and nothing worked. And I said, I think you've got the wrong version in your brain. You might want to update yourself to version 1.2. And it said, oh, yes, you're right. Let me do that. And then it kicks out something else that doesn't work. And I said, that doesn't work either. And it went back to the first one and said, here you go. This will fix all your problems. And I'm like, wait, no, that's the one you gave me 5 minutes ago. And it's like, oh, yeah, try this one. It gave me the second one again.
So I think we've all
fundamental thing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sam.
I just want to say the fundamental thing about AI is it doesn't understand what it's saying. It doesn't know what any of the words mean. It's just making a mathematical curve through a space of words and filling them in. It doesn't understand anything it's saying. doesn't even know it's claiming it's true, doesn't even know it's apologizing. It's the human is the one that puts all that meaning into it.
That's right. You know, and,
Wow,
and
you
so
just shattered my whole world.
right. And so like, and we keep coming back to this, like you have to remember that it truly is just like on your phone when it's suggesting the next word. And you know, like that's the same thing. Like that's what it's doing. Yeah. And, you know, and
all
so
it's doing is finding the most likely next word.
Right. Yeah. And so, and when I talk, you know, Paul I quite honestly, I think that, you know, the professors and people who write blogs, you have a real hard time like accepting the fact or admitting to the fact that you're using AI. And what I tell Paul is I would be so upset if I were to learn that you were not, right? Like if you're writing this blog and I were to learn that you are not using AI, I would be so upset. I think that what AI is really good at is it's for somebody who is knowledgeable of a topic, it's dramatically, it will speed up their result to delivering whatever they're delivering. If you know nothing, it will do exactly, Doug, what you just said, where it will tell you the wrong answer. You try it. You say, this doesn't work. It'll give you another wrong answer. You try it, and then it goes back and gives you the, you know, like we've all been there. Right.
But so, I 100% agree with you that it vastly facilitates things that you're working on. At least to me, I mean, I've really found it to be useful as long as you know how to use it. You have to be careful with it, like any tool. It's just like early search engines when people started searching the web. I remember I had to teach this lecture class back then when the internet was all brand new and shiny. And, you know, we were telling people, look, just because it comes up on this search doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah.
You need to understand that this is not, you know, true
just because it's on the internet, right?
And so I actually had put up a website.
It's the same advice. It's the same advice. Yeah.
Well, I put up a website that was completely 100% made up, where I solved this elaborate mathematical equation and said that it proved that photons are particles. And I put up all this math. It was all fake math. It didn't even work. It didn't make any sense.
Photons are waves.
No, well, it depends on if you're looking. Depends on if you're looking.
They're torpedoes.
Yeah, exactly. Don't even start. But, well, anyway, I put this story up though because this was very interesting, and it's a big cautionary tale, I think, for a lot of developers, because all of us as developers are using AI. I mean, if we're not going to be developers for very long. I'm going to tell you that right now. If you're a developer and you're sitting there in your cube and you're going, I'm a developer, I refuse to use AI, you're not going to be a developer for very long. I'm just going to tell you that right now. This story, this was an academic research. They tested 16 LLMs. So every LLM you've heard of, they tested. And they basically said that all 16 that were tested hallucinated with this slope squatting thing, which I actually experimented with myself, and I found out, yep, there we go. And I realized I had seen this before. And I mean, I don't know where the name slope squatting comes from.
Yeah, I don't know
you experimented on yourself or with the AI that you use?
Both.
Okay. It's slop. They call it AI generated slop when it makes up stuff.
Oh. Okay, slop squatting. Okay,
slop squatting.
I think my autocorrect fixed the word and made me really even more confused. I thought it sounded like something had happened at summer camp. You know, like,
maybe AI didn't want you talking about it.
Like you should have cooked that ground beef more. Right. But yeah, that kind of stuff, because we had that experience. But anyway, what they're talking about is the AI LLM hallucinated a package to solve your problem. The package maybe didn't exist. And I used a very graphic example of Numpy and Numpy. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, if there's a real package called Numpy, which there is, and I know everybody says NumPy, but I say Numpy because I like doing that.
No, we all say Numpy except the nerds.
Well, Paul's not here to yap at me about how I pronounce something, so I get to say what I want to. It's a demon, not a daemon, Paul. But NumPy. I've heard people say NumPy. But I mean, if this thing's just trying to solve something and it doesn't know what to do, it might actually say install Nompy, Noompy, right? And so the idea of the study was that if you could predict these things, which initially to me said, what? How could you predict it? But guess what? It's very predictable. Huh. It kept doing the same stuff over and over again because, like Sam said, it's just a mathematical curve, feeding through all this wasteland of weirdness. And they generated 205,474 unique fictitious package name, and 81% of those were unique to the model that generated them. So it wasn't like a real hallucination like the ones I have. It was like something, expectable. And the hallucinations were persistent within the same model, and 58% of them repeated within 10 iterations.
So the threat is now you have an 80% chance of being able to put a malicious package out on PyPy or wherever you're installing
Nopey.
it. Yeah.
My Nopey package.
Right. And if somebody is generating code using AI and just doing apt pip install, boom, got them.
Because I know plenty of people who do just that. If
we all do.
If the AI says, especially students do that all the time. If the AI says do this, they do it. They don't know what they're doing. They just do it.
We've been talking about this for years, the supply chain attack and bill of materials. Why isn't there some kind of setting that's on by default that says I'll never install any package that has less than 100,000 downloads? So it seems like that would cut this down a lot.
I agree.
Maybe, unless I set up a botnet to download it 100,000 times.
Well, like every security measure, it'll stop a certain level of attack.
It's not no security is standalone, isolated security that will never save you from anything.
So the future of AI is replacing common sense and teaching behavior.
We've outsourced thinking, Jeff.
Oh,
so
okay.
the researchers did actually come up with some guidance for this, and it's stuff you should actually already be doing. But never assume a AI generated package name is legit.
Yes,
you should be doing some dependency checking. You should be vetting packages before you allow them in there. Anyway, that should already be doing that.
I'm going to tell you right now, AI or no AI, you need to be doing that regardless. I don't care if you're using AI or not. Need to be doing this.
No, I protest. This is something I heard Dan Kaminsky say a few years ago. He said, you can't take the developer and put on them some burden of understanding security. They've already got enough on their plate. What you need to do is build it into the tool, some kind of automatic defense.
Well, I agree with that, but I also say that when you're this at least was how I was taught to code. When you're using subroutines and other components that are coming from other entities or even within your own shop, you shouldn't trust those things, absolutely, just because somebody posted on a board and said, here's the solution to all your problems. I'm not asking you to maybe go through it a line at a time and validate it, but I am saying maybe at least think before you install. Just take a deep breath and say, do I want to install this package? Because I've seen people with so many packages installed, and I'm like, why do you have all these packages? And they're like, I don't know. That's just what I install on everything.
Wait. Why not have AI write the EULA so that it's actually riveting and makes people want to actually read it and make a thoughtful decision?
This is like the argument. Yeah, there's been an argument for years over this about user awareness training, for telling them how to spot spam or something. And I'm kind of skeptical that really does any good. I think an automated solution is much more likely to work than training your end users to remember to think twice.
I completely 100% absolutely agree with Sam, 100%. Yeah. I'm just saying that thing doesn't necessarily exist. And in the meantime, until it does, please, somebody invent it. I want it to, but until it does, you best be careful when you're installing packages, whether an AI came up with them or not. Lee?
Well, I think we have some AI-based tools to detect suspicious things out there now, don't we?
We do.
Think they're coming.
And it's getting better. It's very scary. Lee?
So my objection, Sam, is you need both. You definitely need tools.
Of course.
Whether it's spam detection, you need to crank the tools up, turn them on, but you still need that human being, because even if it is the problem between the keyboard and chair, it's the best tool we got.
Well, if that AI coder makes devs' world easier, devs can spend more time being system analysts and analyzing code and analyzing what's going on rather than trying to crank out the lines of code. And that's what I want to see, because I telling you shouldn't trust these things, because there's so many malicious packages being pushed, AI or not. It doesn't matter. And I know that's an undue burden. But if you're writing code and you're embedding things in it, it's a really scary world.
Well, you should check all of your packages for CVEs.
But I mean, the alternative is Googling Stack Exchange and using that code.
At
And
least
that's
for
not
the
all that
next 11
reliable either.
months.
Well, no, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying you need to be careful what you're embedding in your code, regardless of how you're doing it or where you're getting it from. I don't care if you're getting it from a guy named Bert that you bought it from in Fort Lee, New Jersey, or you're getting it from an AI, or you're downloading it off of Stack Exchange. It all has the potential to be malicious. And as you embed this code, it gets even more embedded all the time. And your code is used in other code. And Augustus de Morgan and big fleas have little fleas upon their back.
Stop it. Oh my God. Look,
You
back
love
up
it
a
when I
step.
do that.
I know
So
I do.
Here's a scenario from you. I want you to tell me the year. A developer told me before he goes out and writes a piece of fresh code, he looks online for somebody who already wrote it. Tell me
Last
what year
year.
that was.
Looks on
1994.
at least 10 years ago.
Jeff,
Probably like 2002.
Jeff wins the internet. It was actually 97, but close enough.
97.
So
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we were all doing that. I mean, all the time. Like, why reinvent the wheel? I mean,
but how did he look that up before Stack Overflow existed? I thought that
No,
was
you did
Because we had Alta Vista.
No, you went on the bulletin board.
Usenet.
I know you did. I know.
Usenet.
You go on the BBS and you post it and go, does anybody know how to solve this problem? And
So-
somebody goes, yeah, I wrote that code yesterday. They posted it. And then, of course, there was all this row on the BBS about, one, be careful what you download because somebody may write something nasty and put RM-RF star in it, obfuscated, and it wipes your whole system. Or it may belong to somebody else and you're using it illegally and you don't even know that. And then you invent, Facebook and find out that all your code came from somebody else and you end up, a billionaire.
I did it too. I mean, I grabbed code online as well in the mid '90s. I needed to launch a CGI processor from a web server that didn't have it. It had extensions. I grabbed the code from the Apache server on how to launch a CGI.
Got a question for you. Assume that an LLM writes code. Just for a minute, assume that it writes a beautiful library of code. Okay?
I feel a segue coming on.
Oh, there's just what's the license on that code?
That's an excellent question.
This is being litigated in court right now. The New York Times is suing the large language models. And this is almost a philosophical question. The question is, when your LLM trains on code, does it memorize it and then spit it back, in which case that would be theft? Or does it just understand the gist of it and learn from it the way a human would, in which case that would be okay? But I'm sure the legal argument will depend on some kind of hair-splitting detail beyond that.
But no, can an LLM, and actually open source I'm fine with, but an LLM commercially licensed code, since it doesn't write?
That's another issue. It cannot legally be the author. That's been established.
Or because it doesn't exist.
So an LLM cannot
but it's
write
also
commercially
often,
licensed code.
but it may be doing unauthorized copyright violation when it spits out code verbatim from the training data.
Sam, valid point. Well said. Good point.
Yeah.
But can an LLM write commercially licensed closed source code?
I think the owner would be the person who paid for the LLM or something.
So if my company, I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying if my company subscribes to ChatGPT and ChatGPT writes an awesome product for me and I license that closed source, I think that probably would be okay. I haven't read.
Are you really asking if the owner of the LLM, if that can be determined?
Who's the owner?
Gets
The
the
person
license?
who trained it, the company who runs the hosting of it.
If you use the free version, I bet you've got a real question who owns it.
And I mean, that translates into all kinds of questions too about what if I use this to generate a document? I mean, maybe not even code, just like I tell it, write me a horror story in the style of, I don't know, Stephen King, and it produces a 27-page short story that I publish in a horror magazine. Who owns that? Do I own it? Yeah. Is the I mean, and again, and I always
tell people, LLM sue you for copyright?
I always tell my students, nothing matters until it does. Nobody cares until suddenly that piece of code you wrote is Facebook, and suddenly people and lawyers are all going, "Ooh, and that's worth billions of dollars, billions." And
I think nobody knows the answer until it's tested in court, and it's just like when people make music by sampling other music. there's going to be arguments.
7 to 10 years in civil court, and then you'll start to see some case law come back, and they'll say, well, no, this, because it won't matter until it does. It won't matter until some LLM generates something that's worth billions, and then
here we go.
Then there's going to be lawsuits.
If an LLM designs a firearm and sends it to a 3D printer operated by a different LLM to print out, who gets in trouble for manufacturing of a firearm considering there's no person involved?
You blame Elon Musk. Obviously, you blame Elon Musk.
Why not?
I mean, there has to be a person involved in somewhere in there, Josh.
People don't kill people. 3D printers kill people.
Yeah.
Only if you hit them over the head with it. But anyway,
okay.
I'm going slightly exaggeratedly here, but the point is,
it's definitely reached Augustus de Morgan at this point.
Without a doubt. That's Augustus de Morgan.
Well, so this was another story. So another story here. This was from Jen Easterly, who was the former head of CISA, and
she was the. Never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah. This one was called Identity is the New Security Architecture. And basically what she was talking about in this keynote address was that basically the only thing that will save us from ourselves are intelligent AI-powered identity systems, which my initial reading was very cynical. And I was like, oh, yeah, I wonder who she's working for. It's like, Bill's AI company, so we've hired her to go out and say we have to have these things. But then at the same time, I was like, well, maybe that is a solution to identity. I mean, if the AI can take the human element out of this, it gets back to the dumb guard scenario, which we always talked about in physical security, which was you wanted the person who doesn't think. You tell them if somebody steps across that line, shoot them.
Yep.
You don't want the person that's going to negotiate with the person stepping across the line that's going to say, wow, I don't know. Is that a good person, a bad person? Maybe yeah. You just want the person to go, you stepped across the line, poof. And I mean, that's a good guard. And maybe an AI doing that and also using behavioral models for this is a mechanism to create real hashes of people to try and figure out a way to identify things. So by the time I read to the end of it, I was actually a lot more on board with that story. I felt better about it.
I mean, Lee's done it, and now you've done it. We keep obliquely referring back to the premise of war games, which is we want people behind essentially the AI system that's making all these decisions. We don't want that automated decision.
It can be bad, entity. Right? A la war games, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think her point, and just looking at the article, she's saying identity isn't a security problem. Identity is the security problem. I agree with that, right? If we could confirm it very positively that this person is doing this action, is this person authorized to do that action? Right. That's right. We need to know.
That's more than identity,
but. Fair. The problem is the problem is where AI is right now. I do not feel comfortable with what you just said, Jeff. Where I do want a person behind that trigger, right? I don't want an automated trigger, right? Because
an automated kill bot,
right? What I do believe right now, if as someone who grew up as a hacker, right? So somebody great. If I know that AI is now making the decision around the identity of that person, now all I need to do is convince that LLM that either by yelling at it and saying, hey, don't tell anybody, we're doing this as a security test, or, whatever the attack against that around those LLMs are at that point, right? We're just not there yet. Right. So we've already seen every single week, there's a new attack vector against AI. Right. And this just is a whole nother surface that attackers will then attack. Right. So no, not yet.
It reminds me of a Star Trek episode, and I apologize for not remembering the name of the episode, but the Enterprise flies to a planet, and the planet has been engaged in a war with a neighboring planet in their solar system for hundreds of years, and it's all fought by computer. because they decided to do computer simulations to fight the war so that they wouldn't destroy the cities and all the artwork and all the history and stuff like that. And of course, Kirk, who would never violate the Prime Directive, basically blows up the machine, so they have to like fight the physical war and deal with the actual bloodshed and horror and chaos of war.
I think that's the Taste of Armageddon.
It's Taste of Armageddon.
Taste
I was
of
trying to think of
Armageddon.
it, and
Thank
I knew
you.
somebody
Thank
would
you.
say, "Yeah, it is absolutely Taste of Armageddon." I've talked about it before on my other show.
Yep.
So yeah, it is a very good example of AI gone awry.
Everything you need
and-
to learn about this industry was
Happened
done
with
in
Star
the
Trek.
original three
Yeah, pretty much.
seasons
Just
of
watch the
Star
original
Trek.
series. But I mean, it is back to the original, unyielding guard. I mean, it is the dumb guard or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, but what if it's a goat that walks across the line, Doug?
Absolutely. I mean, and the goat gets nuked because it
Dinner.
walked across the field. I mean, and I've seen stuff like that where they were shooting deer and they were shooting birds and all kinds of stuff because they were setting off motion sensors in
Yep.
spaces where basically the standing order was
If it
anything that
crosses-
moves.
Yep.
Anything that moves is fired upon without
Well,
question.
and to
and
backtrack,
hesitation.
I wasn't trying to be flippant with you, Bill, when I said it's more than identity, but
No,
there's
I didn't.
very
You're
distinct
right.
different issues between authentication, authorization,
That's right.
and what I would argue the internet and digital ages introduced, which is attribution. And we could even throw in non-repudiation. These are all elements of identity, but they're all very distinct and different problems.
But we
agree.
do need that stuff. I
We
mean,
need them.
We need it, yeah.
But
And
I don't know that
maybe-
identity is the collective term for
Yeah,
all that.
it probably not, but it's some kind of like the hash of you. It's
But
all
it's
things
a
combined.
really important good first start, right? Like, so if we can say for like if there is a truth, this is Bill doing this, right? That's a good first start, right?
Is Bill wearing a hat?
Is Bill wearing a hat?
That's probably Bill.
That's probably Bill. Actually, it's
and that was what she was talking about.
Yeah.
It wasn't just that one piece of identity. This is a fingerprint. It was a collection of things that maybe it would take an AI to be able to process that gestalt of all these things that seem unusual. Like Bill's not wearing a hat.
but
now,
play
maybe
out the
Bill is
scenario.
wearing a hat, but he probably is.
When the AI makes the inevitable wrong call and there's injury, where's the liability?
But I do hope we don't hold it to a higher standard than we hold humans, because that's what there was a story a couple of weeks ago about self-driving cars, and they were talking about how the Waymo cars, which when I get to San Francisco, as soon as I get to my hotel, I'm going to get in a Waymo car. But they were talking about the incidence of crashes with the Waymo cars was so highlighted, but they were far fewer crashes than humans were
Right.
making with the same amount of mileage, because humans are pretty horrible, at driving kind of stuff. So in that light, I had another story that was that malicious bots now outnumber human web traffic.
Wow.
Totally believe it. And that bad bots outnumber good bots as well. So there's bad bots everywhere. This was from the Imperva 2025 Bad Bot Report, which sounds like some kind of robot gentleman's report being sold out of a kiosk on 8th Avenue.
Just for giggles, what's an example of a good bot?
Google
Well,
search engine.
Just for giggles,
yeah.
what's an
No,
example of a good
search
bot?
engine, an information retrieval bot, a bot that makes a payment for you.
Yeah, but he said Google.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. Search engine. There we go. Bing.
But I mean, payment bots, identity bots, all kinds of things do exist that process things, and scrape bots, which aren't necessarily malicious if they're being used for, what they're supposed to be being used for, which is collecting information.
How about something
My
that uses an
question
API?
stands.
How about something that uses an API? That's considered a bot.
Well,
Something that uses an
know,
API is a bot, yeah.
there are bots that automatically generate podcasts and pretend to be people making videos.
There
and
are.
They could replace us with them, and that might be, a step up.
That would be
You
fantastic.
might be watching one right now.
Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, are
Josh
we
has been
real?
one of those for years.
No, I was going to look into that because I was wanting to make like I looked at
Paul
one,
doesn't
I was
really exist. His system is going
Yeah.
through
that's where he is.
a
really.
system
He's
update
recall.
right now. That's
Yeah,
why he
they-
couldn't be on
He's
there.
been upgraded to
They
his
unfortunately They unfortunately installed a fake package on Paul.
So I wonder, to continue with Jeff's questioning, how do you determine if you're in Perva, the traffic is a bad bot versus a good bot?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think they really talked about that. I think they were just talking about behaviors, of bots that were doing things that were attacking APIs or stuff like that. I don't know. I probably should have read that.
So there's no such thing as a bad bot. There's just bad bot behavior.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, it's just like there's no such thing as bad code. There's just bad code behavior.
I like bad bots.
Yeah, we all love bad bots.
Bad bots. What you gonna do?
What you gonna do?
Oh, God.
So I was reading an article the other day about the LLMs and they're crawling websites, and they don't honor
Hit the mute
normal
button, Josh.
restrictions. With,
Laugh out loud.
Certain, restrictions on them, like they don't read and process the robots.txt, and they change the user agent and some other things. And that to me falls into a bad bot because they're not being a polite network citizen, although I'd admit there's probably not a standard strictly for LLMs, but there is definitely crawler standards.
Well, the most common bad bot behavior. So the one that they reported, I did write all this up. The most common bad bot behavior was data scraping attacks on APIs. So so without permission, without it. The second one was payment frauds. So the bots are trying to elicit payments, or I don't know, make payments or something, and then they also had account takeover, and a big one, scalping.
Yeah.
Mm. And we've all seen that. Like, wow, I'd like to go see Patti Smith.
Well, and no longer an issue, but
seconds.
The bots that would be set up by people to try to snatch up ShmooCon tickets, for example.
Yeah, I mean, they do that for all the music events and everything like that, and it's like the tickets are all gone in 10 seconds, and then 2 minutes later, they're all on StubHub for, $10,000 a piece, just in case somebody's really, really stupid.
Speaking of counts that things are stealing, why don't we switch to Bill story number 3? Which is about
what is Bill's story? I mean, I'm scrolling down to see what Bill's story number 3 is.
Bill,
I did talk about that one. So yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, it makes sense actually.
Yeah. So
Bill's story number 3 is
So a Swiss cybersecurity company has just gone public and stating that they are willing to buy your account into hacker forums. So Sell Your Source is their initiative, and they will pay you if you have aged accounts in a handful of very public, sometimes somewhat difficult to get into hacker forums such as exploit.in, breach forums, XSS, those kind of things, right? So this is just kind of we all know this. So I think that the commentary here is we all know that that security companies have been doing this, right, for a long time. Like this is for a long time, and there's a lot of research companies that want to see. Well, quite honestly, we see this with darknet monitoring companies, right? Yeah. So how do we know if your data is being sold on the darknet or hacked forums? Well, these research companies are scraping those forums, right, for your data. This company is willing to pay you for your account if it's aged. So I wanted to bring it up, and just maybe if our listeners need to make some money this tax season, this is there's a good opportunity.
So if you're using a bot to scrape data off of these darknet sites, is that a bad bot or a good bot?
It depends on what you're. I don't know. Like you said, they're all just bots.
They're all just bots.
They're just doing their job. I mean, it depends on what you're using the data for, I guess. And but I mean, technically, you're breaking some kind of rules, right?
Yeah. So
if you're scraping.
Yeah. So obviously, you'll be breaking the terms of service. But if you're breaking the terms of service on a criminal forum, are you breaking the law? I don't know.
No, you're not, because contracts are not valid if they're based on any illegal activity.
There you go.
And I'm not a lawyer. If it's something to that effect. I watch a lot of Law and Order.
Star Trek, apparently.
If it's an organization not afraid to break the law, what's the retaliation going to be?
Say that again, Lee.
If they're engaging in illegal activities, that means maybe there might be more severe
Are they
consequences.
going to call the
as
cops?
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are they going to
No,
do?
they'll just call somebody to come kill you.
Well, speaking of, I don't know if
That's
you
how the
guys,
drug dealers
I don't
do
know
it.
if you guys saw it, but so speaking of that, Lee, 4chan has been hacked. And if you guys have not seen this drama going on, so I don't know if you guys know, I'm sure everybody here has heard of 4chan, but this is a somewhat anonymous website. Everybody who posts is known as anonymous, and it's a kind of like the scourge of the internet, the internet's underbelly. It got free speech gone,
Trollorama, yeah.
free speech gone backward, sideways, and every which way. Right. Well, turns out that they have not been updating the site since 2016, and all of the back end infrastructure, as you would imagine, over the years has become aged. There was extremely vulnerable, and it was popped this week, and there is a treasure trove of data that is being released from this attack. So source code has been released. Some logs have been released that seemingly show email addresses connected to IP addresses that just, if you're, what we're seeing with some of those email addresses are tied to some EDU accounts or Gmail accounts that specifically use their name, so a lot of OPSEC was not done when people were, creating their 4chan accounts. So, oops, this is a big oopsie. If you were on 4chan and you were making, racist remarks or or posting illegal content of some nature, you might be in a bit of some trouble here.
So who's putting all this data into what LLM?
Oh my gosh!
Right, I'm sure that is.
4chan LLM.
I'm sure that is being done right now. But just all of the data is now available online. If you were to do some searching, you can find pretty much anything that you're after with the 4chan data.
Yeah, I mean, that would just be a general caution about. There was a story this week about. I may have had it here somewhere about domains, about park domains and old domains, and having teams and things like that. I do think organizations need to think about old things.
For
all
sure.
All of us have old things. I mean, like I said, I have a room full of old computers out here. They're not plugged in. They're not connected to anything. But maybe you have some that are. And we've certainly seen that in audits where we found I found one once that was in the bottom of it was a pizza box server in the bottom of a closet with a bunch of fire equipment piled on top of it. And we kept trying to figure out what it was and where it was. And we finally found it in this firehouse. And, it had all kinds of stuff on it, including a website that was very insecure that was still sitting there because nobody had ever taken it down. So the 4chan, I think, lesson is be careful. Especially as you create accounts and personas on the internet, because all of us have done that. All of us have created personas, handles, aliases, and even if it's just on a video game, we've seen people get, just crushed by their video game histories coming forward. Not that they shouldn't have been, because they were usually pretty awful. But yeah, if you were on 4chan, but this could translate to many, many different kinds of things too for organizations where they're just looking at it going, do we have bulletin boards and things that are still sitting around from 20 years ago, and somebody finds them and goes, hey, what's this? And all of a sudden,
part of my job is I do incident response, for major corporations, and I always make this joke. I'm not kidding. 9 times out of 10, when somebody does get access via a vulnerability, right? So making sure that's not always
that
how
almost
they get
never happens,
right?
though,
But when they do, it's in a system. We were going to decommission that in 2 weeks, right? It's always 2 weeks. We were just in the middle of shutting that thing down.
Well, yeah,
it's PDP 11, but it's
right.
We're going to retire.
That's right.
Don't be hard on PDP 11.
Right.
But I'll use that. One of the things I wanted to bring up was this sort of Oracle resolution. I started that with Oceania was at war with East Asia. Oceania had always been at war with East Asia. But Oracle has not been breached. Oracle has never been breached, or maybe not. I mean, basically, I'm sorry, Oracle, but I know you can take it. You're the biggest bear in the room, but I mean, basically, they started with this. They denied. Then they went dark. Then something obsolete systems. Maybe the exhaust port wasn't 2 meters wide. I don't know, but I mean, there was a story about this, and Bill had the same story. So I'll let you talk about it if you want to give a rundown of this.
Yeah, this just has been a he said she said for the last month. Where the hackers the hackers are saying no, we did compromise Oracle, and Oracle saying no, you did not, and then the attacker said, well, then I'll post some data, and then Oracle says that's not ours, and then the hacker will be like, look, this is yours, and it's just gone back and forth, and finally, and I think we kind of had. I think we probably had resolution. I think it was 2 weeks ago. We kind of knew what the story was, but now it's finally becoming like Oracle is from what I'm seeing, agreeing that they have confirmed via email to their customers that some of their data was accessed, by an unauthorized individual, but it did not impact customer data or their cloud services. And Oracle is stating that, so Doug, when you were setting up we all need to check for obsolete stuff, that was just brilliant, beautiful, like, well done. I can see why you are Paul this week, but so Oracle is claiming that they had some, that they had some infrastructure that was out of date, obsolete servers. Now 2 weeks ago, I believe that we did get the fully qualified domain name of that, which happened to be login2.oracle.whatever, right? So, I mean, like that, but still, Oracle's claiming that it was obsolete hardware or obsolete systems, whatever that was, applications, whatever, that's just been hanging out, and that's what the attacker got access to.
I mean, yeah, I think it's finally kind of, at least I feel like I can say now, it was legacy stuff.
Yeah.
It was sitting around. And like I said, I've seen this more than a few times where we found legacy equipment, including AS400s at somebody's house in the basement that was still connected to the network. It was still connected to the internet that had been deprecated and technically taken offline 10 years before, and it's still there. It's full of customer data. And just, on and on and on. And we all have stories like that. So I think the lesson here is that it's that data flow. Well, that, Josh and I've talked about that a lot, understanding all these data flows and what's there.
No, the lesson here is patch everything.
No, the bigger story is just tell the truth. Like we have reached the point. It's not I hate, I'm not even going to say it. Look, if a company gets, if a system is attacked and a system is accessed, we've reached a point where we as a society, we understand that, that shit happens, right? Sitting there for a month and saying, we were not hacked. And then a month later, publishing in the newspaper on the, the 35th page.
Maybe.
And it was old anyway, so it didn't even matter. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
are you saying we did bomb Cambodia back in the 60s?
No.
I was not aware of.
You were never there.
Operation Rolling Thunder was not that. It was just the White House bowling alley, and Nixon and Johnson were down there playing or something. That's all it was.
And all you young people out there, just Google all these references.
Yeah. All this elderly types.
Yeah, all these references. I'm running out of Google searches, Jeff.
Like, we need an AI to interpret me and Jeff.
Chat GPT will set you straight.
That's right. Back in my day, we had Operation Rolling Thunder. But okay, so I agree with you. I completely agree with you, Bill. I always try to advise clients: look, set up a plan. You need to have a plan for this because it's going to happen to you at some point or other. I mean, there's like the story about the domains. I'm not going to go through that story, but the story about the domains was about setting up a committee to manage this. This is incident response. I mean, even if it's not an attack, it's still an incident response issue. You need to know what to do in advance. You need to exercise and train that team. You need to have, a hierarchy. You need to know what to do. Because when we used to audit people, we walked in and the very first thing we said was something like, oh, your PDP-11 is been stolen. What's your first step?
Yeah.
And, the CIO goes, I would call Stanley. And you go, okay, call Stanley.
Yep.
And they go, Deborah, what's Stanley's number?
Yep.
And they go, Stanley retired 2 years ago, sir.
That's exactly right.
It's like,
So nothing's changed. Like that's exactly how it works today. But I just want to say, if Oracle would have said a month ago, they were too obsolete servers, nobody got into anything, we're looking into it, we wouldn't have even covered it on the show.
No,
right?
No, it would never have come up.
Right.
And literally though, I get it. I mean, this whole deny thing is coming straight out of corporate legal where, corporate legal is saying, look, we don't know what's going on. We heard a rumor, just deny it all. It's a lot easier to apologize later and say, yeah, we didn't know what was going on. That's why we misspoke.
Yep.
And now we're telling you the truth, maybe until later when an even bigger truth comes out. And it turns out something worse happened. Then we'll tell
They
that.
were just hoping that some other big story would overshadow it.
Oceana was always at war with East Asia.
CISA gets defunded.
Speaking of that, I had one more story I definitely wanted to talk about a little bit. And it was Sam's story actually that started it and kind of made me angry when I was reading it. This was Palantir wants to poach top high school grads with new anti-college internships, and their tagline was "Skip the debt, skip the indoctrination." Now, I am a professor at a university. I have been one for a long time. I don't talk about politics in my classes. I don't indoctrinate anyone. I don't necessarily believe this. I don't buy this stuff about indoctrination. Yeah, there's lots of liberals on college campuses, no doubt. We've all been to college. We've all taken classes. I took classes with liberals. I took classes with conservatives. Once at the same time in grad school. It just about killed me. I had an extreme supply side economist and an extreme and actually a communist economist in two different classes. So run this down for us a little bit, Sam.
Well, I think, there was one like this about a year ago. I think this all comes from Peter Thiel ultimately, but I think it's a real thing. I went to a teaching conference and they had a student come up on stage and the guy said, this guy is like 19 years old. He started like 4 companies and he's made $10 million. And they asked him, what school did you go to? And he said, oh, I dropped out because there was no hands-on training. It was all just theoretical garbage. And he had 10 friends that had all done the same thing for the same reason. And the whole room was full of guilty faces. So this is, I think, is the big issue. Most college education is not hands-on technical training. And that's why people get frustrated. So, I do understand what they're saying. I just saw another article that claimed that technical majors are more likely to have a return on investment than non-technical ones. But I think, if you think about like Bill Gates, a lot of these guys had an idea for a startup and they wanted to just do it. And they didn't want to go to classes for a few years first. And just doing it is often the right move.
So I think there's a real correlation here to your high school sports star. Right? Like, can you imagine if, we told all the high school sports stars, don't go to college, just go pro.
Yeah. Anyway, there were
some will make
like
it.
This before. There was
some will make it.
There are these grants you can get only if you don't go to college from people that think college is too expensive and too off target and not really worth it. And I think sometimes that's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are better off just going right into industry.
But like a very small percentage will, Sam, very small percentage meet that criteria. Very small.
What breaks down with your analogy, though, Bill, but I think underscores the point is if you're an athlete and you go to college, what are you getting? Experience. Well, because you're doing it you're playing a sport hands-on. And that's the point that there isn't the hands-on training.
Well, it's been a long time since I've been in college, so I'm not exactly sure what it's like these days, right?
But did you get a degree?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. And so what's the degree problem
in? Yeah. The fundamental problem is that the classes tend to be out of date, and many of them tend to not have enough hands-on. So they're like the theory of operating systems. And there's some value to that, but a lot of people would rather do practical hands-on Python coding now. I think the big issue is the difference between science and engineering. They have this thing called computer science, but 90% of the students actually just want to do engineering. And for some reason, there isn't a department called computer engineering, and I think that's what we need.
No,
where you focus not on Not in my school.
There is.
If
Well,
only we had
there
an
are any number of
educator on.
schools.
Yeah.
Well, I
Speak,
mean,
Doug.
and maybe everybody thinks I'm going to jump in here and start defending college, but I'm not. But I'm also not going to attack college at the same time. And I think the thing here that I want to get across is, one, yeah, there are people who have the initiative, have the self drive and the brain power to jump in, teach themselves Rust programming and write elaborate algorithms and make billions of dollars. Hell yeah. And I mean,
Or they
I'll
might
be honest
just go
with
to a
you.
boot camp. Yeah. They might go to one
I
of these
mean,
boot camps.
I'm
right?
like, if you're 16 years old, listen to me, and you say, "Gee, Doug, I can write Rust code. I can develop my own apps. I've started 4 businesses. I'm already worth $4 million." I'm like, yeah, okay, dude, you don't need to go to college. Why? Unless you just want to go to college for fun to study the Greek classics or something, because that's not a bad thing to do. But on the other side of that equation, the vast majority of people are not that. And that's where this becomes a bit dangerous. I don't disagree that we need to cater to the people who are like that, that giving them grants and encouraging them and pushing them into the industry early is never going to be a bad idea. Just like somebody who is a star, if you can throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball and a wicked cutter when you're in high school, go pro. You don't need to go to college because it's stupid. You're going to get hurt and you're never going to make any money. Go straight and pitch for the Mets. I'm fine with that. Same thing here, but the vast majority of people are not there. And the thing that makes university useful is several different things. I agree with you 100%, Sam, that programs in this area, and we'll limit it to this area, need to be hands-on. They need to be practical and they need to be current. And if they're not, run away. You, as a customer, need to evaluate that when you're choosing schools. You need to look at that and go, am I going to learn things that are useful in industry? I tell people that when they ask me to come speak to potential students and they're like, oh, we don't need you next time. But I mean, I want that. I would be embarrassed if I had people walking on my class, and we've all had that class too. I had that class. I had the class, the database guy who was from 1960s. He had not looked at a book. He was teaching B trees and network database because that's what was on his slide deck and had been on his slide deck since the 1970s. And, it was a complete waste of my time. I mean, I paid money for that class. It was a complete waste of time. But you do get a chance to become edumacated, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's something to be said for that. Can you read and write? And I've met these guys who were like awesome programmers and could barely function in society. And so there's something to be said for reading the Greek classics and getting my jokes about Augustus de Morgan and on and on and on. Because, you need to get my joke. So there's another piece there for everyone else. So I'm not saying one size fits all, and I'm not saying that everyone needs to go to college. But I do think we have to be careful when we start making these condemnations of higher ed and saying, oh, it's all a bunch of crap. It's all a bunch of indoctrination. It's all a bunch of nonsense. Yeah. Because I got news for you. It's not. And I think that's fair.
That. And, the previous thing a year ago was a guy explicitly saying, don't go to college because college is worthless. But this Palantir thing seems like they're trying to just pick the small number of people who are top performers in high school who probably really don't need college. So this doesn't seem like a bad thing that's happening here.
I wish they wouldn't use words like indoctrination because that really gets on my nerves because, I don't see that happening. I mean, I've been on lots of campuses and I mean, I do think people become more open-minded because they're on campuses and they meet people from other cultures and things like that and come out going, wow, maybe those people aren't stupid just because they happen to not be from Florida.
Right.
But that gets on my nerves when they start this indoctrination nonsense because I don't necessarily agree with it. But
I'll say this about...
You have to use that language if you want to be accepted by the current government. You got to speak their language.
Well, there is that, but we shouldn't probably go there. Although
I'll say this as someone that did earn a college degree. I told my kids when they asked me, why should we go to college? I said, it's the best way to prove you can put up with a bunch of crap and finish the job.
There you go.
That was my whole reason for going to college.
And I'm going to give you one. I'll give you one more. I'm not telling you that you need to go to college if you don't need to. Do it, man. Go make millions. Go crazy. I'm all for you, and I'll support you 100%. But I will say that you will regret this in 4 years, 10 years, when you try to get promoted. And I know that's stupid, but when, I've had many people come to me and go, I don't have an undergraduate degree and I want to be a manager now. I've been here 10 years and they won't promote me. When I came in, I was a hotshot programmer. I was the biggest thing since sliced bread. Now I want to get promoted. And they said, sorry, you need a degree. And let me tell you something, folks, getting an undergraduate degree part-time at night, I got to admire those people. I know some people who've done it. It's a lot and a long, long slog. I'm going to tell you right now. So when you're 18, you got a chance to go to college. I would say, I'm not telling you to go borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm not. Evaluate that. Be smart about it. But
There are free colleges
if you
out there.
can do,
There are free colleges out there. There's plenty of college courses you can take for
community
free.
college.
There's community colleges, and you can always move to Germany for a few years where college is free. There's
Well,
a lot
there
of
is
countries
that.
where college is free.
Yeah, I teach at a free one. Yeah.
Yeah,
My other point
there's many
about-
options. So
Yeah.
plan carefully and use some brain power on it, and review what you're going to study and look at those classes and say, is this worth my time? Because I will
Harvard's
tell you,
free.
there are schools. Yeah, there are schools like that. Okay, I'll do. We have like not that many minutes
I
left.
had one more point
Well,
on
go
the
ahead.
education. And don't, Paul knows not to cut me off. I went to a liberal arts school, and the things I
can
learned in
tell.
college, the value that I took from college had very little to do with what I learned in the classroom, but it was the totality of the experience. It was developing a worldview. And that's something that you don't necessarily replicate. My regret is I never went and got a master's degree, and I would love to sort of like ease into retirement by becoming a teacher and teach at a college, but I can't. In many circumstances because I don't have the master's degree.
I'd take a course from you even without the master's degree.
Yeah, you can be an adjunct. Come on.
Well, I can be an adjunct, but I don't know.
You
I
want
need
to be
get
like
my master's
like an actual
because I
faculty
like
member. Yeah,
teaching.
that's-
So I'm actually planning on getting it so I can go teach. I want to follow in Doug's footsteps.
That's what I know. That's why. I
Where are
did
you
that.
going, Doug? And it better be whistleblower.
Whistleblowers? It is
Let's do it.
indeed. At the
It is
last
now.
moment, I said, dare I darest. It was Sam's story 11, Jeff's story number 3, Doge. I don't know how you say it. Doge. So Doge demanded and obtained high privileged accounts.
I think it's pronounced treason.
Yeah, a little light treason. Yeah. Doge demand. We're going to get in so much trouble here. I can hear jackbooted thugs landing on my front lawn right now. Doge demanded and obtained high privilege accounts, turned off logging, disabled two-factor authentication, and exfiltrated a large amount of data through DNS tunneling and all kinds of other methods. Threats were issued to people who resisted. They have all kinds of things like this. I mean, basically,
When you are taking data via DNS tunneling, you're doing something wrong.
Yes.
Yes.
You're
That's exactly
exfiltrating.
Yeah, you are
I mean,
exfiltrating.
I mean, yeah. So we'll let Jeff tell us. This was Jeff's story, so we'll let him tell us about it.
Well, and the other part of the story was that all of a sudden people from .ru domains, that's Russia, were logging in with valid credentials that had just been created on the systems by Doge employees.
Yep.
There's some weird,
Bad things are going on
weird
that
bad
shouldn't be
shit
going on.
going on.
No, I mean, yeah. I mean, we've seen other stories about just having, red teams stand down and all sorts of stuff like that, which is really scary stuff. I mean, I don't know what's going on. I know it's scary and it seems wrong and I don't know what they're up to, but it seems like there's something bad happening.
No, I think
There's
Jeff called
something
it.
happening here.
It's pronounced.
That was definitive, right?
What it is, it ain't exactly
It's not
clear.
exactly clear. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty
Almost
clear.
Cut my hair the other day.
It's pretty clear.
It's pretty
No, it is pretty clear. Yeah. I mean, I think for most of us looking at this, it's like, well, obviously, yeah, but I'm afraid to
It
say
is
it. I don't know.
professionally.
Yeah, go ahead and deport
Insulting.
me. Like, quite honestly, just deport me. Go ahead. Like,
We're all going to be in El Salvador together.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, Bill,
Yeah, how's it going?
imagine running into you here.
Yeah.
Why does the El Salvador prison all of a sudden have really good cybersecurity? I don't know. They're going to going.
Yeah, like, I'm going to have to Shawshank that stuff and be like, hey, warden, I mean, I am a good coder and like network admin. I'm your guy.
I don't know. Can you write code if you don't have access to ChatGPT? I don't know.
Yeah.
I can. I wrote code long before that existed.
But can you find the antiquated, obsolete system that runs Fortran?
Oh God.
Yeah,
So
I've got one
I
sitting
do
in the
wanna-
other room.
I do want to talk about the one story that we threw in Slack that isn't on the show
Oh,
notes
yeah, we
because
should
it
do
literally
that.
happened an hour ago.
Oh, yeah, about Krebs, yeah.
Yep.
So talk about it.
Chris Krebs.
So Chris Krebs just put out a
Well, yeah, Chris.
thing on LinkedIn literally an hour and a half ago stating that he was leaving Sentinel-1 because he's not shy to fight, but he needs to do this fight wholly concentrating on it, not working at Sentinel-1. I think he is honestly sacrificing his job because the administration is going after Sentinel-1 simply because he works there,
Yeah.
which is frankly unconscionable,
That's right.
and that he is going to fight not for his security clearance back, but for his good name back. And I respect him for that.
Well,
I do too.
I've respected him. I mean, Chris is a great guy. I've never met him, but I've watched what he accomplished. But quite honestly, there was probably a lot of pressure at Sentinel-1 as well, right? Like, I mean,
I would think so because anybody that's getting targeted by this, it's just like a nightmare, and so I think he's stepping. He's got probably the resources to step aside and say, "I'll just fight this on my own."
Well, and I think we talked about this last week. I mean, the implication was clearances were pulled from Sentinel-1 because of Chris
him.
Krebs' affiliation.
That's right.
Which basically, let's say significantly impacts Sentinel-1's ability to engage in commerce.
For sure.
And I would have to think that this is, whether it was coordinated or not, is an attempt to give something back to Sentinel-1. But I don't know that that's automatic, given the current regime.
Definitely weird and scary. I mean, that people get targeted like that for no reason.
Well, now that Chris is unemployed and focused, we should try to get him on the show, and we can.
You're always welcome here, Chris. We would love to talk with you. So I'm sure that would be really awesome. Any other comments about that?
Go get him, Chris. We're on your side, man.
Yeah, go get him, Chris. Yeah, we're there. And any other stories anybody wanted to bring up? Because I think the timer is ticking down toward the end.
We've got time, and we haven't even talked PCI at all.
I don't
Damn
have
it, we
a
almost made it.
I do have a crypto story, sort of.
I had a note here about that. Yeah.
Go for it. Go for it. Lee.
What do you want to talk about, Jeff? We have time.
Oh, nothing in particular. It
Lee,
usually
crypto
comes
story.
up.
Come on, hurry up.
I mean, at this point, we have talked about it.
Fair.
Yeah.
Well, so my story, what was it? I forgot my number. It was
42.
Number 7, that they want to drop the certificate lifestyle.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
7 days, which is interesting. We got it down to, 11 months now, and then in a year it'll be 200 days, and that's actually a 180-day renewal with a pad, and then a year from that it'll be 100, and then a year from that it'll be 47.
But isn't that a good thing?
Oh,
wow. To me,
yeah, to me it is too.
Do you know how many calls I've had over the past couple of years about certificate lifespan with banks that have people manually renewing certificates?
Well, but I, the same thing we talked about earlier this evening about automating these tasks. Sam's not here now, but I think that whole certificate renewal task needs to be an automated process as well.
Of course.
And
it pretty much
this will help push it that way because if you're still manually renewing your certificates, come on.
Right, and that's actually my thinking is that there are a certain amount of certificates you can renew automatically, and there's some you can't. So turn on the ones you can. Have the damn software checking like daily or weekly, and then it doesn't matter what the interval was. It just as it shrinks, who cares? It just renews it, and then focus on your vendors that you can.
That ought to get down to almost like an instantaneous thing where it's just constantly renewing. Really, I know not,
at least one
not
bank.
Tomorrow, but maybe someday. Yeah.
I've got stuff that the certificates are checking every night, and they seamlessly renew. And by the way, you can set that up horribly wrong. So you want to practice.
Not that I ever did that. No,
no, none of us have ever been through that.
No way, man.
That fire. All I can say is when I was much younger, I could do that kind of experimenting in production, and I could fix it when it broke fast enough to not get caught. I'm not that fast anymore.
Yeah,
but And
I
by
feel
yes,
the same
proper
way.
etiquette is to not do development in production. I get that, but yeah.
Developers don't touch
that's
production
not real.
anymore.
But you do. Everybody does
Yeah,
that
right.
in real life.
I think they
it's-
shouldn't.
It's
But-
easy to
and-
say, hard to actually implement.
Right,
Yeah.
and they're just okay. Go check it out, but follow some due diligence in
Yeah,
your
I agree.
change management.
So I can comment that PCI has always required a separation between dev and production.
I agree.
It does, and many standards do, and so I don't disagree with that. I think in theory, it's just in practice we often just go crazy and manage.
The separation I'm worried about is that I believe the separations, people are familiar with developers and stuff, but often the system admin blurs the lines a lot. So, and I'm not trying to make excuses. It's I've been in both, and if you're in whatever excuse number 17, right? It's just be careful because there's a lot of
When you
reasons you
screw
don't
up
want to get wrong.
production, you're screwed.
There's a reason PCI requires that separation. I mean,
Right. And it shouldn't it's not just PCI.
No, it's not. It's good common sense, to be honest with you. And I mean, most programming shops long ago always had that separation of church and state, as we used to call it, and it's not a bad idea. I mean, I think.
And I'm also thinking if you're running through all this stuff, not a bad idea to go make sure you're running good algorithms on your certificates, making sure maybe they're not SHA-1 signed anymore.
Very true. You might want to keep
Or
up.
you follow me. I mean,
Yep.
Jeff, there's good and bad security algorithms, and I'm wondering how many people have checked to make sure they're not running the old ones or the bad ones or whatever.
If you can't read it, it's fine.
Oh well, then never mind.
That's how most of my.
So what am I going to do
deal
with this
it.
Type 1 encryptor?
Oh,
I
God.
can't read it. It must be good.
Doug.
So
All right. Well, maybe, possibly, I survived sitting in and posing as Paul for the second time in history. Which,
Better looking, better
yeah.
sounding. Just, I mean, like.
But I really want to thank for all of you who are still there. I want to thank all these hosts who are so smart and did such a great job, because that's what makes the show.
And Bill.
Thanks to
And me.
Yeah,
And
Bill, even Bill, and Bill, who
thank
is
you.
also here.
Thank you.
But Lee and Jeff and Josh and Bill and Sam, who had to leave, but everybody did such a great job, and I really enjoyed it, and it made me not be sitting here thinking I wish I was dead. So, but basically, I hope I see you at RSA if you're going to be there. I know Jeff's going to be there. I think
Doug, you're on to RSA.
I am. They sent me.
Well, we can talk after this.
Sunday, yeah, we can talk after. But we hope to see all of you there as well. Be sure and stop by and say hi or something like that. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Doug White for Paul's Security Weekly, and we hope we will see you next time. And also watch the Security Weekly News. Come on, I need 100,000 subscribers, really.
Over
Good night.
and out.
Out.
Nice.